Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Dojo Talks. Today, our topic is, can Hans Niemann become world chess champion? And as anybody who knows Jesse knows, that means world classical chess champion, not world pickle chess champion, not blitz champion, not online zippity zap chess champion, chess 960 champion, none of that. Classical world championship, the title currently held by Gukesh. This topic was initially resisted by Jesse, and we feared that
And
unless we
me.
had a surge of
I also
patrons,
resisted.
and Kostya, everybody's against me. And I feared then that unless we had a surge of patrons supporting this podcast, this particular episode would never happen. But somehow, Jesse changed his mind. I don't know about you, Kostya. Do you want to do this episode?
I think it's okay. I think in the past I would have been more against. Now I'm
Okay.
less against.
You think there's like a chance we'll make a mid episode here?
No, it's just like it's a very touchy topic. Anything around Hans, people kind of tend to lose their minds a bit. So you have to be you have to be very delicate. But
Oh, I thought you liked that. Like, put out a topic like that, have Jesse and I put a foot in our own mouths while you giggle.
I mean, we'll see how it goes. No, but I mean, it's an interesting question. It's a bit. We could have done this episode like a year ago when Hans was doing his like journey to World Chess Champion daily vlog thing,
Mhm.
which I would love to discuss.
Yeah.
Um,
Time flows strangely at my age, so I don't know exactly when it was that Hans first declared that his goal was to become world champion, but I feel like it was a few years ago.
hmm
So I feel like we could have done this topic at any point in the last 3 years. Or as Jesse was saying about the can Levy be a GM question, we could have done it repeatedly every few months, updated it again, like milked it again, put like
hmm
a thumbnail of Hans with the shadow of Bobby Fischer or with lightning coming out of his eyes or something. Could have milked it.
It's a good idea.
Anyway, here's why I'm excited to do this topic. I think that this topic is a chance not just for us to talk about one interesting chess player, but for us to talk about what does it take to become world champion, right? In answering the question, yay or nay, I think it's our responsibility um, to each sort of lay out to some extent what we think the characteristics are of a player who could become world champion, and if there's anything that, particularly disqualifies one player or another, or Hans in particular. Um, so I'm just gonna kick it off and tell you guys I think Hans could become world champion, and I will justify myself later, but I've talked enough. Let me pass it to Kostya.
Well, I mean, of course there's some chance. I guess the question is like, who's the most bullish on
Yeah,
Hans?
what's your percentage?
Percentage. Yeah, I think. I mean, you could go last. I'm happy to go first if you want to.
Okay. But I mean, there are people for whom the chance is actually zero.
That
Zero doesn't
zero,
make sense.
zero never. Yeah, that's too much even for me. I was thinking about that. I was like, even for me, like I could be the first person to get a chip installed in their head. So it's not zero.
Wouldn't that be cheating?
I don't know. I mean, we know that Hans would put a chip inside his head if he could.
Wait,
Maybe
are
he's
we
already got
saying
that
that there
chip, dude.
that players are allowed to cheat to become world champion? I thought.
Or there could be a huge congregation of chess players that I had to stay home from, and some incredible accidental event happens to them all, and I'm the only one left standing. Well, it's a non-zero. It's probably not gonna happen, but it's not a non-zero probability, is what I'm saying.
Oh, you'd be the designated
I'd
survivor
be
of
the
the chess
designated
world.
survivor, yeah, dude, and I'd be world champion. So there's a
And then
path.
you'd be world
Okay,
Okay,
I
it's
give
true.
I give Hans
But
about
let's
3 to 5%. I'll just throw it out
Okay.
there
Let's
between
leave nuclear
3 to 5.
holocaust and stuff like that out of
Yeah.
it, right? Let's like assume that not every other chess player on the planet is going to perish and there'll be like 10 people left somewhere. And as they're struggling to find clean water, Jesse announces, let's quickly have a world classical chess championships. It'll only take 30 days, guys.
Yeah, it's a bit of a force majeure
Yeah.
situation.
Let's
Okay,
assume there's
three
a
to five
player.
percent is my number. I think he definitely has chances to do it. I think he has definitely become a stronger player since like 2, 3 years ago, which to me wasn't clear if that was going to happen or not. So for
Mhm.
me, he's definitely become stronger. So he's continued to improve. He still seems to be very ambitious, which I think is important. He has a very clear goal in his mind. So nothing against him. 3 to 5% might seem maybe low to some people. I just think it's so competitive. Like it's actually ridiculous now. You have like so many strong juniors. Like okay, Gukesh, I think for sure is world champion. So he,
So
1 for 1.
100% chance.
100% chance for Gukesh. But to become world champion, you'll have to, beat Gukesh at some point or something like that.
Yeah.
Then, I mean, for me, like of the current juniors, I would say maybe I would give Noterbeck a tiny edge over like Arjun and Prague
Mhm.
and then maybe even like Vincent Keimer. Like there's like it's and I think okay, like there's plenty of older players too that still have it. Like Caruana could still become world champion at this point. Like Nakamura could still do it. Like
Yeah.
Nepo, I think definitely still like there's just plenty of players that could still become world champion. Faruja is there. Like so
To me,
it's just
plenty is
very
a strong
competitive.
word, but there are some. The ones you've mentioned were reasonable mentions. I don't know how long you could keep going
Well, no, I
with
mean,
older players.
okay, so I remember a time when Nepo was like 27-20 for like a couple years.
Mhm.
And then at some point he jumped up to 27-90 and became a candidate, like at a kind of like a later age. So
Hmm.
Right.
players that are talented can have like huge jumps and all of a sudden become champions. I mean, Nepo was very close to becoming the world champion himself.
So you're warning me that somebody like Fedoseev could gain another 50 points this year, even though he's 30, not 20,
Yeah,
and
he's a
become a
great example.
candidate.
Someone could keep gaining and maybe not become the world champion, but at least like affect things. You could lose a game like that to a lot of players. Okay, so that's my number.
3 to 5 is substantial. How about you, Jesse?
Well, where were you, bud?
Me?
Yeah.
I haven't calculated a percentage yet. I wasn't as prepared as Kostya this time, I guess, for my own topic.
Yeah, okay. So I will I'm pretty sure well I think so we did another pod talking about who we think the top 10 is going to be next year. And to my great amazement, these two clowns thought that Neiman was going to be in the number 10 spot. And I was shocked. I was like, "Really?" So already we know from that I am not bullish on him. I don't think he's going to make the top 10. No, no way. So
Well,
what are my chances? I would say under 1%. And
Mhm.
the weird things like the Holocaust example or whatever. Yes, there's ways in which that could happen, but it's not going to be the normal ways. Maybe he
Right.
gets the chip. I don't know. You know.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, so I can't yet predict for players under age 15 or under age 14 who is a real candidate to become world champion. It's too early in their lives and their development,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So I just thought I kind of thought about, who of all the chess players in the world that I know of by this point, right, has a chance to become world champion. And I feel like if you say 15 and over, there's only about 10 people who I think have a chance. And I understand you guys are right. It's not absolute zero for everybody else, but I would guess if it's like 0.00 and then some number, like I'm just going to call that zero for now. I'm going to round
Okay. Yeah.
those people down to zero, right? Um, so for example, Wesley So, right? Like I just don't think that he's going to be a world champion. Obviously, it's possible. He's been number 2 in the world and he's not too old to change his, I don't know, ambitions or approach or whatever, right? But I guess if we start talking about what makes somebody world champion, one thing that's probably helpful is wanting to be world champion. And I don't get that sense from some people. So then I'm going to kind of leave them out at
Mm.
around 0%. So
Hmm.
I think, personally, I think like if you let me name 10 players, I could name 10 players and guarantee you that no one else in the entire world over age 15 would ever become world champion in the next, 20, 30 years,
Mm.
other than someone from that list.
Okay.
Um, and so I would put Neiman on that list. And so that tells you that people on that list, they have to add up to 100% just among the 10 of them, pretty much.
Hmm.
Um, or close to, right? Because I mean, unless Gukesh just holds the title forever, right? Then I guess the odds of some, yeah, okay, I didn't really think that all the way through. Um, anyway, my general feeling is that like the top candidates here, like Erigaisi, Abdusattorov, and Prague, I would say that's the trio with the best chances. And my gut feeling is that they each have a chance somewhere in the like 10 to 15% range, somewhere in that range. Like I don't think anyone has a better chance than that. There's just so much competition. Plus, you have to beat Gukesh. Plus, there's going to be other people catching up with you, right? So I can't yet estimate the chances, but you guys know that there's this kid Roman Shogziev who
Yeah.
became an IM at age 10. You want to say the name for me, Kostya?
No, no, I don't know his name, but yeah, there's that kid. There's the
Yeah.
3-year-old Anish Sarkar, who
Right. So you've got a
is
3-year-old
definitely
rated
going to become world
600.
100% for Anish Sarkar.
I guess so. You've got a 10-year-old IM who's like really good. Like he
Mhm.
was competing with GMs in Blitz and Rapid already in the past, in the previous, World Blitz and Rapid. And when you're like 9 or 10 years old, you go back a year to a competition. Like it's a substantial portion of your development as a player.
Yeah,
So my point is these guys don't have forever, right? They have to A, come out on top of all the other pack of like top candidates now, right? And then they have to topple Gukesh. And they have to get it done before somebody who's 10 who we can't really see coming
right.
gets there and like surpasses them. And we don't know exactly who it's going to be in my opinion. If you look at like 10, 12-year-olds, we don't yet know who it's going to be, but they're actually going to get there pretty quickly, right? Like in 10 years, those 10-year-olds will be 20. They'll be candidates basically, the top tier ones.
Yeah. No, the danger is coming. You got those Turkish kids. You got like Mishra.
Yeah.
It,
So
those kids are coming.
you've got about 10 years basically where you'll sort of be at your peak before the next generation starts to peak. You've got 8 to 10 years, that's, 4 or 5 cycles. And I would say, real competition of about 5 to 10 people who could get that candidate spot. And then once you get through all of that, which is maybe a 10% chance to get through it once, then you've got maybe, a 48% chance to beat Gukesh. And then you have to go through the whole thing again the next cycle if you don't beat Gukesh, right? So I feel like 10% is very substantial, and that's probably around where guys like Aragaisi, Abdusattorov, and Prague are. Then, as Kostya mentioned, there's guys like Fabian Naka who still have a chance, but because I would say they only have 1 to 2 cycles left of chance versus 4 or 5 cycles of chance, I'm going to rate their chances lower, even if right now they might be like 10 rating points stronger than the teenagers, right? But if you just add up their chances over their career, it's going to be much smaller. So guys like Fabian Naka might have like a 4 or 5% chance left,
Mhm.
similar to what Kostya gave for Hans. And yeah, so obviously from what I said, I don't think Hans has as good a chance as Erigaisi, Abdusattorov, and Prague. I think those guys have maybe like a tiny bit more, maybe a tiny drop more of chess talent. Maybe also they're like a year or two younger, which is still something, it's just a little more runway. But I would guess that Hans's chances are somewhere around 5 to 7%, maybe,
Wow. Okay.
now that I math it out for myself.
Uh-huh.
Wow. Okay, so you're above me.
Yeah, you're the most bullish.
Quick time out here. Did you know that the dojo is an incredible site with tactics, a database, a community of people trying to improve, a training program? All of this is going on at our site. So go check it out. ChessDojo.club. Hit the link in the description.
I was thinking I might be a bit high because you made it sound so hard. I was thinking
Yeah,
I
yeah. I
should
mean,
maybe
I think your number was pretty substantial and not very different than mine. Pretty substantial. I mean, we both think that he could be about number 10 in a year. And I think we both think that that's not his limit, right? So
yeah.
it definitely makes sense that he could have a couple candidate cycles in him.
Okay, I have three tracks that are bearish on Hans, and I'm going to label them the objective one, the subjective one, and the practical one. But before I get into that, I just want to say there is one way in which I think there's a positive scenario for him, and that is these coming tournaments where FIDE allows kind of the chance for rando people to make it into the candidates tournament, right? We got 3 spots in the open thing, and then I think 2 spots in that knockout situation. And so that is
Maybe
at
even
least
three.
3 and 2
Yeah,
respectively.
vice versa.
Oh,
Yeah,
excuse me.
three in the
Right.
World Cup and then two in the
Right.
Open.
So that's enough randomness that somebody like Hans, somebody who's not in the top 10, could get in the same way that Abbasov got in, as an example. So that's
Yeah.
at least a path, which, at least at least there's some statistical shot for him to get
Mhm.
in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, Vidit also got in that way from the
Right.
Grand
Right.
Swiss, and he was a little bit outside the top 10. He was kind of about where Hans is,
No, he
Vidit.
was around 13 in the world, and Hans is like 20.
Yeah,
Big
pretty
difference in
close.
my head. I mean, okay.
Okay. The ratings were pretty comparable. I think you gained some of those rating points
Mm.
while winning his ticket. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Let me start with what I call the objective, and one of the objective vector of why he's not going to make it. Um, One reason I thought this actually I came around on this topic was it gave, I think as David's already said, it gave us the opportunity to discuss, well, like what would it take for anybody, not just Hans, to make it to the top. Okay, so objectively, there's 2 big problems that I see for him. One, his rating graph does not look right. It's like it doesn't look like the trajectory of a world champion because he had this in just a stoppage when he was a kid and he was playing poorly. I have some personal experience of watching his games at the time. I'm going to relate in the subjective one, but that I think is a big problem that he had years of no growth. It was just like years of like Hans ain't doing nothing, right? In critical years, like 15, 16, these years where he was doing nothing.
And it was not just COVID, Jesse. Wasn't he like
No, he
16 or
actually had
15
his
during
has
COVID?
he had his he started doing better with COVID. When you look at when he was just stuck, it was, I mean, he was between 24 and 25 between September 2018 and January 21. And that's a huge amount of time to be stuck.
But
He's just in that critical phase of your development to just be
but nine
completely
months
slowed
of
down.
that is COVID. There were no tournaments, right?
No, he was playing tournaments. Like you look at the rating graph, he's playing all the time. He's playing every single time. Um, and then, he has this rise in 21. That's technically still COVID. Okay. The other thing, which I think is more significant, okay, is that when you think about this generation, it is by far the hardest generation, I think, ever. And so think about it just in terms of generations. There's Magnus's generation. So that would be, in my mind, Carlsen, Nakamura, Fabi, Wesley, Anish, Jan, all these people that were right around the same age. And then we've talked about this before. There was just this weird thing where, like, no one was coming into the scene after it. And some people say it's a Magnus effect. Like, he was so strong that, like, no up and comers were even coming into the scene. But now it is dramatically different. And so you think about Arjun, you think Gukesh, you think Prague, you think Abdu. Maybe this kid Aravind. I definitely think, I don't know much about Aravind, but he's definitely got more of a chance than Hans, right? And then you go start looking at the juniors, and you got to say Sindarov, 19 years old, same. These kids are all basically right around 19. Sadwani, Merzin. And then, of course, you have people younger than that. And I'm with you, even for, you said 15, for me, even 18. Like it's, kind of at 18, I don't know. But all of those people, I think, have a significantly better shot, even though they're lower than Hans now, but they got 2 years of growth. They're 19. I expect what, like Sindarov said, Wani Merzen, one of those kids is going to be up there by the next year, right? Competing for the big spots. So it is the worst time to try to become world champion.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I mean, I think we would agree it's a very competitive time.
Yeah. I can't imagine another time when there's so many there. And he's 21 and they're 19. These kids are still growing. There's no doubt that Gukesh, Prague, Abdu, they're all growing immensely. And we'll see if Hans can grow more. But, at 21, you're going to start to just get minor gains. It's not going to be like huge explosive growth.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. I don't really have any idea what it's like to get from like 2730 to 2800. Like that is just astronomical places for me.
right.
Yeah.
But somehow they do it. Somehow they do it. And, I don't know. Um,
And I think with the competition there is, I think Jesse might even argue that to become world champion, you might even need to get to 28-20 if we're talking 2 or 4 years from now.
And maybe even at least. Maybe even at
Right.
least,
Or
right?
maybe even more, right? Because
Yeah.
it's even without Magnus, some of those other guys that he's mentioned are going to be
Oh, yeah.
2800.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, okay, we can come back to some of those points. Then on the practical level, I'll get the subjective last. On the practical level, I think it's a huge deal that the guy doesn't have any coach or support system. And when you look at the other kids who are all 19, I don't know about some of the other ones that are lower rated, but definitely all the Indian kids and Abdu, those kids have a whole package of people behind them working in a way that previous generations weren't really able to. They didn't have the resources. The amount of
Mhm.
resources the Indians have now through various private and state sponsorships, extraordinary. And so
So
just
if
a,
I told you,
yeah.
so if I told you that like Fisher could make it on his own with a very individual personality and strong drive, you would say it's a different time. And that with the current level of competition, even somebody like Fisher would need a team.
Well, let me just talk Fisher. I mean, that's one of the amazing things about Fisher. That was like the thing that was so amazing about the guy. And also, actually, when you think about Fisher, it's not just that he um, didn't have a support system, but yes, he played some tournaments in Europe. But if you compare like the amount of games that he got to play to other players of his generation against very strong players, very few. Very few. And that brings me to my next point. It on a practical level, it really works against Hans that he's a confirmed cheater. So he is just getting less invites, and Magnus is blocking him all over the place. Magnus still thinks he's a cheater. For this podcast, I'm going to say I don't know whether he's still cheating. I don't know. He's cheated before, and the fact that he has cheated is going to make it difficult for him to get the invites, and that's already been the case. That's already hampered his career. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, we should say that on the previous point, I feel like it's not totally true that he doesn't have anyone in his corner. I mean, he's been hanging out with Kramnik a lot, and I feel like that is something, like the guy's been there, and
hmm
I'm sure he's giving him lots of advice.
Wait, Kramnik is helping him, not posting nasty things about him now?
This has been the case for you're way behind on the internet. This has been the case for I mean over a year now. I don't know. It's been a long time. Yeah.
Kramnik tagline despising cheaters. Kramnik, comma, despising cheaters
Uh-huh.
is working with
I
Hans.
think I think they had a natural brotherhood because Kramnik is shunned in a way that I feel like that Hans is also shunned. So when you got two
Wow.
shunned people, you're going to join forces and
Yeah,
hold
they've
hands
got the
and march
common
through.
enemy, the chess.com mafia.
It's
A
chess.com
mafia.
mafia,
Okay.
right?
Breaking news. Thanks,
Yeah.
Kosi.
But let's talk about Kramnik for a second. I'm sure he's helping him a little bit, but contrast that just for a moment with the scene that I imagine that goes around Gukesh on the daily. He's got a trainer, he's got a sports psychologist. I bet he has a chef, right? Uh, and when I think about training, like the ability to just wake up and not make any decisions. You don't have basically no decisions, and someone's going to plop some stuff in front of you. You're going to march through it. You're going to talk to your sports psychologist about what you're doing wrong. Then your team's going to address that in a training program. Contrast that to some dude who's sitting down playing like Title Tuesday and talking smack on the internet. I'm sorry. You're going to get wasted. And it's not just Gukesh. These other Prague, Abdu, they have teams too. They might not have as much money as Gukesh, but they got a training program that's moving.
I do think that's a good point. The other thing is that Hans has, it seems like a lot of distractions. Like
Yeah,
he's been doing this like endgame.ai thing, right? So he's trying to like build this like platform. I think it's going to be like a playing platform. And so he's doing a lot of stuff for that, but he's like trying to market for it. So he's like hiring people. So it's like all this non-chess work that like from experience is not good for your actual chess game. So I agree with Jesse. Like Hans needs to like train extremely seriously and needs to yeah build a team around himself. I think that would be very very helpful if he really wants to make it.
I remember like one year around January 1st, he tweeted something like, goals for the year, become the best chess player in the world and the best chess streamer. Like
Mm.
he was mad at, I don't know, Hans. I mean, he was mad at either Nakamura or Gotham or somebody and decided he would overtake them in streaming as well. And even that, just two goals. A lot of people said, well, if you want to do one of those things, maybe you should focus on that one. Like becoming the best in the world at something. Hard to do that in multiple things at the same time. So
right. And we haven't,
I
yeah.
agree distractions are
Hmm.
not promising.
Okay. I'm sure we'll come back to a lot of these points, but my third, let's call it a vector of disbelief, is just subjectively. So, one, um, you guys were like, oh, he's done things like one Title Tuesday, and he beat Magnus and Naka and other people in these Title Tuesday. Doesn't that augur that he's doing well? As a fan, I don't know if he's still cheating. I have no idea. But
Mhm.
it there's a non-zero there's a fair chance in my mind, and this is just my subjective take, that once you've cheated, and there was a lot of events that he did, like I think especially where he crushed the junior field one year and it was like hard to believe moves. There's been a number of events where I'm like, OTB even, I'm not sure that there isn't some juice in there. and
Right.
and once
So if
you've
I extrapolate that the level of that play was like insane and that's a reason he could be world champ, and you say, but what if like the exact games that make you think he's on another level are because that's not really the
Because it is
level.
another level, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not making accusations. I just
Yeah.
like the rest of the chess world. I looked at it, and part of that thing I said on the objective like rating graph, what it looks like, that was
Hmm.
why the same reason that the top players like Magnus and others were like, this kid is clearly juicing, you know? I don't know, but that's definitely a thing in there. Also, the cheating bit and the way he lied about it didn't bode well for me as from a character perspective. And I do think you need a very strong character to make it through this
But not
business.
necessarily a good character. It could be a strong and bad character.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but you're gonna need some fortitude and you're gonna need to own some stuff. And it was very hard for him to own it when it came out. Okay,
Okay, just as a question,
yeah,
Jesse, let's say for example that Hans hadn't cheated over the board,
yeah,
or let's say he did cheat over the board, but a while ago.
yeah.
And
And
his
then
current play,
since GM or something hasn't cheated OTB, didn't cheat against Magnus, like his rise to 2700 has been legit. What would you think about his level? Because I agree with you. I mean, it's given his history, it's yeah, it's really hard to say one way or the other. But
Oh, like
yeah.
would that raise it from 1%, less than 1% to 1%?
or I mean, where do you feel like his level is? Because I mean, his rating's pretty high and it's been
Hmm.
going up. I mean, do you not feel like he has a 2750 level or a 2775 level capable in him? I mean, you don't think a 21-year-old's going to make many significant strides, but I mean, since he's been gaining points consistently this past year, we have to assume his performance rating is currently above whatever his rating is, right? Like he's got to be already a bit better than his rating.
I mean, maybe. I mean, we'll see. Yeah. I mean, obviously, we'll see. I think if we want to talk about top 10, I really don't think that's going to happen. But that's of course far more plausible than world champion. I mean, it's just far more plausible. Now, to the question, let me say the other thing about it that maybe relates to the cheating question because I don't. And again, I don't. Okay, but let me just lay this out there. I did the commentary in 2019 for the junior in St. Louis. So I'm covering all these games. And what's really striking in my memory about that tournament was Hans's chess was not at all impressive. And he was by no means the strongest in that field. I mean, not even close. So when you think about it, like you're saying that somebody is going to become world champion that wasn't even close to being the strongest junior in their time in America. And it's like, oh, God, that's hard to believe, you
Well,
know?
he wasn't yet 18 or 19, right? It's an under 20 championships.
Yeah, he's about 17, 18. He was older than most of the kids there. You
Oh,
know.
But
Yeah.
he did win a U.S. Junior Championship, I think, a couple years later.
Well, that's the one where he's really accused of cheating. That's the one where, my God, I look at those games and I'm like, oh, buddy, that one don't look good. That one don't look good. And the other thing about the cheating accusation, right, and the sudden rise that happens, surprisingly late, which is why Magnus and the others are so suspicious of the dude. About that cheating accusation is that if it's true that he was able to cheat inside of the St. Louis Chess Club, which in my experience as a player is the most protected against cheating that I've ever played in. If he was able to do it, then it's like, oh, he's really able then to do it in other places too.
and then you're gonna have to say he's got a good chance of becoming world champion.
That's right. But you did
You don't think anyone can stop him?
you discounted. You started us in saying, well, we're not
Yeah,
going to
yeah,
talk about the cheaters if it's
yeah,
done by cheating. Yeah.
yeah.
Kostya in a previous conversation was like, it's just a certain point until we get the chip, and yeah, the chip is on its way.
Oh, I've been thinking about the chip. Well, okay, I was talking to some non-chess players about the chip, and they were thinking that if someone gets a chip, they just won't be allowed into tournaments. We'll just have some rules against it, or the chip has to be powered off or something. Like we'll have
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
some
just
kind of way to deal with it.
zap you on your way in. Deactivate you.
Uh, but yeah, I guess that would make sense. Like if you get a chip in your brain, you can't compete in games, and stuff
Mhm.
like poker and cards and whatever else might be.
Anyways, if he was cheating at that junior, I have no idea. But if he was, that means that his level of sophistication with the cheating would be just incredible, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and so if it were that at that stage, then I don't know. There's a strong suspicion I have of like he's still doing it in some sense, you know. I don't
And
know
you'd
how.
think he would need a team to do that, right? I mean, he would have like he'd be like a prodigy of cheating to pull that off on his own without a team,
You
right?
think
He'd be
you
doing
need
technology that no one else
right.
had figured
You
out
need
at a
some.
very young age.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I don't think he could be both cheating and not have a team and like not all of this picture could be true, right?
Well, when I have when I say have a team, I mean some people who know about chess and training and that
Hmm.
kind of thing. But to have somebody tell you cheat, I don't know. That's just one guy in a van, some guy in a van parked outside the St. Louis Chess Club. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, all right, let's maybe talk about a rubric for like what kind of traits you need to be world champion,
Uh-huh.
and we can see what he may or may not be missing.
Hmm.
Because there's only one thing Jesse said that really concerned me on his whole list of things against Hans, which was the possibility of distraction. That was the only one that made me kind of go, "Ooh, yeah, that could be a problem." But here's my list. Number one, top tier talent. Number two, top tier work ethic. I think like to be world champion,
Hmm.
you have to have an exceptional, like world exceptional talent, and you have to outwork everybody at the same time.
Yeah.
You can't coast on talent, nor can you work your way out of not having enough talent.
Hmm.
I think you need both. Then I think you need to be psychologically strong, at least like don't have issues with pressure. You have to be like, have that sort of competitive, whatever it is, right? To not choke, right? Like
Will to win.
yeah, will to win, be able to just at least while you're in the fight, you put all distractions aside while you're in there, right? And you pull like your maximum reserves out. If Jesse says your system two bucket is empty, not sure I'm saying that right. If he says your system two bucket is empty, you have the ability to just like refill it a tiny bit just out of, you drain some of your willpower into your bucket or something. Um,
So far,
so
3 for 3, I think, for me.
yeah, I think those are critical. And then this next one, I would say good physical shape. So I'm not saying you have to be like a top tier athlete, but I think if you were out of shape, that might disqualify you. So you need to be in like at least good or decent physical shape. And that's kind of the end of my needs. And then I've got three questions. One is, do you need to be a child prodigy? Like, do you have to have, been competitive by age 12, 14, 16 with other players your age? Or, like Arjun was like a year or two behind being like a proper child prodigy, but it was
Mm.
just like, he was just like like started like a year or two later. But then if you look at the trend, it's pretty
Hmm.
similar to a child prodigy.
Hmm.
So I don't know if that's necessary, but I was wondering about that. Then my other question was, do you need to have never plateaued pre 2700? And that is a question Jesse brought up with Hans. I'm not sure that that needs to be the case, but I was trying to think like, and we could say how extended does the plateau have to be disqualifying? I think
Hmm.
everybody is going to have like a 3 month period at some point where their rating didn't go up,
Well, he definitely had the
depending on
plateau, man.
tournaments and stuff, right? But Hans has like a 21 month, no, sorry, like a 22, 23 month plateau around 2460.
Well, also, let's just say
That I'm right.
from and in 2016, he has a rating of 2320. Okay. And then we fast forward to 2018, and he's got a rating of 2329. Okay. So
We had
we
another
got we got
plateau
some
1 year.
significant plateaus. And then he goes up 100 points and then is plateauing there too.
Yeah.
So, that part of it just doesn't look, I don't know if it's disqualifying, but it doesn't look like somebody who's going to become world champion.
Yeah. So I don't know to what extent we've got past world champions or, people who were challengers or top 3 or 4 players who had significant plateaus. I guess Nepo would be an example of someone who must have had some plateaus just based on him having been more of a late bloomer. And he made it to obvious challenger to the world championship a
Hmm.
couple times. So I don't know if that's disqualifying. I've got two question marks on it. And then the last one I had is like no distractions. Like, do you have to have a single-minded purpose? In other words, would Faruja, for all his talent, for all his, uh, you know, youthful trajectory, would he be disqualified just because he had a second interest?
Well,
You
David, let
know?
me ask you to clarify something because you said something really interesting, not to have plateaued before 2700. And I hadn't
Mhm.
thought about it that way, but it was interesting. Then I just looked up Jan, and Jan definitely did not plateau until 2700. He was on a pure rise and
Oh,
then did plateau in the 2700s. Took him a while to get to 2750, but he definitely did not plateau until then. So,
okay.
but what was
So even somebody who progressed a little bit later or slower than we think of for a prodigy went all the way to 2700
right?
without a stop. Yeah. So that I mean that might be a thing. I don't know.
And he was definitely a top junior too. Yeah,
Yeah.
in his
He
age.
was a top junior, yeah. I feel like it was his plateau was more like 20 to 26-ish or something like that, right? I mean, Wei Yi also had a plateau, but he was already 27, 20 or 30 at age 16 or 17 before he started his plateau.
Right.
That's the problem. They get to 2700 without effort, and then they don't know how to work.
They don't know what effort is yet.
Yeah. Um, and actually, when we talk about talent, like I mean, pull up any of those games, and he doesn't have a like there was a game I remember he had some end game position and he just gave a draw, and I was like, really? Even then, I didn't. No one was thinking he had a chance to win the world. No, nothing at that point. But even then, I was like, "What are you doing, buddy?" Like if you had been seeing that game, David, you would be out of your mind with anger that he agreed to some draw in an interesting end game. And I was just like, "Oh, what are you doing? You want to be a fighter, and this is what you're doing." So there was like the lack of fighting spirit, and the games themselves in this early period just don't speak to me of somebody who has some amazing talent. And honestly, that's why because it's not just that graph, but also the quality of those games that people like Magnus are like, clearly he's juicing, right?
Mhm.
That was why that whole conversation became so powerful from the elite players, and then the fans didn't understand the accusations, but it was because they saw that the graph and the quality of the moves when he was in that formative period that they were like, yeah, clearly this kid is juicing.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen games of his that definitely made me think that he had top tier talent,
Hmm.
but maybe it was too much talent. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, some of his games look really, really good to me.
Hmm.
Um, and often it's sort of strategical insight, like a sense of holding a position in a certain way and then gradually making progress here or there.
Hmm.
Um, and at the same time, obviously, as any player of his generation, he's dynamic and he adapts to changes, but I felt like he was seeing the strategic potential of certain positions
Hmm.
in a very special way, like a skill that's really his versus anybody else's.
Okay.
Um, and most world champions are going to have something that nobody else has, right? They're going to have something that you haven't faced against anyone else.
Well,
And I would say that is something that Hans does have.
hmm. One thing that when you made your list of things that a world champion needs to have, one of the interesting things about Magnus, and maybe I wonder now, I've wondered for a while, is Magnus's memory is so strong. In our Aphantasia pod, we were talking about how maybe you do really need to make it to the highest level. You need some kind of memory like Magnus's, where he can just remember so much. Like if I learn an endgame, for example, I got to go over it again and again and again. And then I need, like a couple years later, I need to practice the thing. With Magnus, it seems like he just sees it once and it's over. Same thing if he sees
Mhm.
some game from 1952, he's going to remember the names of the players, when it was played, maybe a detail about it or something. And
Right.
that's just remarkable. And maybe you need something like that. And they do memory tests on these other guys like Levon, and they have it too. And I'm like, well, part of me is like, I don't know if you absolutely have to have it to become world champion, but I don't think Hans has. I don't think Hans has that. Let me just say.
It's definitely an incredible weapon to have at all times available, any weapon you've ever seen before,
Mhm.
right? I mean, Jesse's referring to things like knowing how to play the queen versus rook endgame, either from the winning side or how to set up the best, computer defense from the losing side,
Yeah.
right? Or the rook and bishop versus rook endgame, or rook on the long side with, some of these rook and pawn endings have, very clear little bits of theory at the end with a couple pawns. And to just have that at your fingertips, so you don't even need time on the clock to reconstruct it. You can just
Mhm.
do it on the increment at the end of a game. Um, Amazing, right? To basically be able to let table base take over for you as a human.
Yeah.
Um,
It's hard to imagine competing with that, right? Like, how are you
yeah.
supposed to, what am I supposed to do? I feel like a little lamb to the slaughter. You face somebody like that.
I mean, you have to get them with some other advantage, right? You
Yeah.
have to have some really great strength of your own.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, fortunately, he's not going to have to defeat Magnus in a match to become world champion. That's
Honestly, you'd have a reasonable shot. Magnus is so messed up about him, right?
Dude, if
mm.
I would say this is a prediction, if someone becomes world champion that Magnus really doesn't like, I think Magnus is coming back, dude. I think Magnus is gonna come back for that one. And Magnus, the level of hate he has for Hans is extraordinary. And
Mm.
so I just want to stress this thing where he's gonna have less access to tournaments, like especially the top ones. He's not getting
Hmm.
into Norway, right? If we talk about the premier event of the year, that was Norway, and he's not getting into that ever, right? And
Yeah.
I think that goes for a lot of the other events too.
It would definitely find a lot of money for a Magnus Hans match. We were talking about Magnus Gukesh match would be
Yeah.
exciting,
Hmm.
but a Magnus Hans match, once Hans is a bit higher level, I think
Yeah.
would be pretty big.
What do you guys think of what do you think of the list of qualities needed to be a world champion? Similar lists.
No, I found it mostly agreeable. I was just thinking if Hans has these things, and I was thinking, I feel like he checks most of the boxes, with exception to the point about distraction. Um, but I feel like he has kind of everything else. Heart of a lion, you know,
Yeah.
clear focus. Um, but yeah, it's tough. It's like kind of crazy to think about what it takes to surpass people at that 2800 level. Because with Magnus, it was just like very clear, like, oh, he has a gift. So he's got maybe multiple gifts. And yeah, of course he's gonna be number one. But now that he's out of the picture, it's like a uh more interesting question. Who's actually gonna be able to break through?
I think Hans's practical problems, right? Like the not getting tournament invites, the issue with some players not liking him, right? The issue with maybe people don't trust him or put more pressure on him
Mm.
because of the cheating thing. There's a chance that all of those negatives are actually a positive for him. Like in a superhero story where you train with weights on all the time, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then in the end, you're stronger than everybody else, right? I think he probably went through a phase of being really angry, right? Like, I can't get into this tournament. I can't get into that tournament. Let me sue these people for not letting me play, Feeling frustrated. But he's come up with like an attempted solution, right? Which is playing these matches against other people. And beyond that, the more general strategy is just to get so much better that none of those things can hold you back, right? Like, if you can show up at the Grand Swiss and win the tournament, it doesn't matter that they didn't let you into any of the other tournaments for the circuit or this or that, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I'll share with you something that Sam Shanklin once told me, which I think is relevant. And he said, like, when he was younger, he also was often struggling to get some opportunities, right? Like, honestly, probably most chess players feel like they got passed up for this opportunity or that, or they wanted to get into this tournament and get an invite, maybe not as dramatic as Hans, right? But anybody coming up, you probably have a sense of like what you're ready for, and the world doesn't have that same sense yet. So, if you want to get into an IM Norm tournament at your local chess club and then they pick someone else over you, right? Or you don't get into the US Junior because of this or that. And what Sam told me was like he used to get frustrated about little obstacles, practical obstacles in his life. And eventually his theory was there's no practical obstacle that you can't overcome by gaining 100 rating points. So whatever it is you want to do that someone's not letting you do or that you can't get into or this or that,
Mm.
just go gain 100 rating points at any darn tournament that you can go to, right?
Hmm.
And there's some tournament somewhere you can play in or match or something, right? Gain 100 rating points and it'll solve that problem. Instead of yammering about it, complaining about it, talking to somebody, getting a promise that, oh, next year we'll give you an invite, blah, 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 then getting disappointed when they renege on their promises or whatever, right? Instead, just go gain 100 rating points. And I feel like Hans is employing or has come up with on his own that same Shanklin advice, right? He's like, they won't let me do this, they won't let me do that. I'm just going to get so good that I can't be kept back anymore. And so that's what I mean by it being like training with weights on, right? Instead of trying to get an invite to a round robin where he'd be one of the lower seeds, he's just trying to get to 2800 and just, then what to, then ask the chess world what they want to do about you, right?
Yeah. Um, so good they can't deny you.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
he's I think he's well on his way to that.
I think it makes sense, especially these matches he's doing. He can definitely gain a lot of points doing that. Um, so yeah, I guess the question is like if the talent is there. Like, does he actually have the talent to reach the absolute top?
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
I think
actually, Shanklin's an interesting person just to reflect on this objective measure of what the rating graph should look like. And I
mhm.
think one of Sam really did do an impressive thing with an incredible amount of hard work. As far as if I could just compare the two, I would say Sam has a much better work ethic than Hans.
Mm.
Um,
Probably.
but when you look at just objectively with the rating graph, the problem with Shanklin was he started too late, right? And so did that mean he had zero chance of ever becoming world champion? I don't want to say zero, but that's what I mean by an objective measure. When you just like pull back and you say, well, what does a rating graph of a future world champion look like? And like,
Mhm.
there's an example of like, it's kind of like he was doomed from the beginning, Sam was, and that he started chess so late. Maybe my,
Because of like this question of do you need to be a child prodigy to be a world champion, right? Sam started maybe 2 years too late to be a
yeah, that was a
child
big,
prodigy.
let's just say it was a big problem for his development.
Is that enough to disqualify? Yeah.
I mean,
I do agree with you
disqualify
about his
never,
work
but it's
ethic.
just like that when you started trying to like address what chances somebody have, one of the
Yeah.
first things I think, I mean, anyone will do is just look at the progress and what does it look like? You know, does it look like a natural progression or not?
Yeah. That
And I
has to
like
be.
what you said about the stalling out at pre 2700. I thought that was an interest. I had never thought about that before, but I think there's probably something to that
Yeah.
because it just speaks to what is the talent level, right? Uh,
Yeah. Personally with the sort of like question of distractions, I don't think that someone can become world champion with a second career anymore.
okay,
You
but
know, you can't be like a doctor who plays tournaments on the weekend and become world champion.
I
So,
totally agree. However, however, David, Naka, dude, I mean, it's like it's
I
the
know,
exception that's just it makes no sense to me. But we
right.
just, I mean, one of the reasons Hans became a streamer and is talking about streaming now is just because of this horrible Naka example, which is probably
Yeah.
setting all kinds of American chess players back.
hmm Yeah. So I mean, personally, I would think that if Ferrugia wanted to be world champion, he'd have to like very much dedicate himself only to chess. And I would say the same for Hans. He would have to put aside some of those other ambitions outside of chess and focus. So when I say, 5 to 7% chance, that includes, there's probably some chance that he keeps trying to do other things, and that's what holds him back. But I think if he, quickly lets go of whatever this endgame.ai thing is, or is happy to be the number 5 streamer instead of the number 1 streamer, um, I, I think I think he'd be fine. And let me just make one more argument in favor of him,
Hmm.
which is let's just talk about how strong he is right now. Um, like the people he's playing matches with, that he played matches with, were no chumps. I think the best one was Anish Giri, who is in the top 20 in the world as well. So like, and Giri is somebody who for sure has the top tier world championship level talent, by the way. Um, so I think Hans, if his rating now is 2730 or so,
Yeah.
I think he's probably already playing 2750 level. So that would be my estimation of where he is now, is he's probably somewhere between 2750 and 2760 in strength. And then we're talking, how many more improvements can you make at age 21? Um, I'd say 50 points is not impossible. It would be a lot, but it's possible. So that's where I see him as being within striking distance of 2800. And if you're 2800, then obviously you're in the discussion for world champion.
Um, if I was going to make a bullish case for the kid, it would be like he does have legions of people who feel he's been wronged, and they would definitely organize if they felt he was serious about making this push, and he could get them to give him some cash. He could put together a team, you know.
Hmm
He could get some world-class people behind him,
Yeah.
some kind of
That would be
trainer,
really helpful.
right?
That
He
would be
needs
really helpful if he assembled a team like
Yeah,
that.
he needs a real trainer. Kind of like the way Fabi had Kazim Janov, for example. That was
Hmm
great for Fabi. He needs somebody like that, and he needs a whole team of people around him. I think part of his problem that's holding him back is he's got this ego thing of like, I'm just doing it myself. You know, it's a world,
Yeah.
me against the world. Forget about
Right.
everybody. Also, David, I just want to push back on this 3 to 5%. Okay, let me just push
Mhm.
back a little bit. You got, let's just say you take Naka and Fabi out. Let's just say you do. They're going to be around for at least a couple more cycles, anyways. But then you got Arjun, Gukesh, Prague, Abdu, Faruja, and this kid Aravind, and I think some other kids that are 19 that are coming up. That those just add up to way more than 95%. That's just like that's some force. That's some powerhouses right there, you know? Talk about talent. Think about Faruja, dude. The kid just turns it around. All he has to do is get his head straight, dude, and he's coming
Mhm.
back. All these kids. Oh my God. It's
Yeah.
such a strong generation. It's just unbelievable.
Well, here's my full list of people 15 and over, Jesse, who could be world champion.
Okay.
Fa- Fabi Naka,
Mm-hmm.
good chances in the next cycle, but thereafter it kind of drops off.
Fair.
Fabi Naka, Erigaisi Abdusattorov, Prague, Faruja, all going to be around for a few cycles.
Yeah.
Although I think Faruja's chances are small. Um, then I've got Yagizer Dogmus, only 14.
Yeah.
I think he's got a chance. Then I've got Hans Niemann, Gurel Adiz, the other Turkish kid,
Yeah.
Zemel Jansky from my junior draft team. Basically, I drafted everybody who I think could become world champion.
Uh-huh.
Zemel Jansky. Um, and then I think nobody else in that 14, 15-year-old and
But
up range.
okay, but
There's
you got to
there's the two
mention
10-year-old IMs who I think have a
you
chance,
got
but
Sindarov Sadwani Murzin right there, but
no.
staring you in the face.
I give them all the fat X. And I'll even say I think that Faruja and Kamer's chances are minuscule. Like Kamer's chances are less than 1%, but I'll mention
What's going on with Keimer? I mean, that kid seems super focused, no
yeah,
hobbies,
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
what
He's great.
why is he what do you guys
He
think? Why is
missing
he
from the
stopped
world championship
progressing?
list. He's missing top tier talent.
You think he's missing talent?
Yeah, he's got world number 5 to 10 talent,
But then okay,
which
maybe,
is
but
pretty good.
but but to say Faruja's in the same category as Keimer is ridiculous. Faruja's proven that he's 2,800 plus talent.
Yeah, I think Ferrugia's got a better chance than Keimer. I barely put Keimer on my list. I'm just
Yeah.
telling you my list is very exhaustive. It includes people with almost no chance.
Yeah.
Dang.
Huh. Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's everybody 14 and up in the world who could have a chance at the world championship. If you wanted to bet against me that anyone off of that list would become world champion, I'd give
All
you a
right, dude.
100
All
to
right,
1
just
odds.
humor me. Why is Sindarov not on that list? That kid's amazing. He's 19. And you
I
don't think
know.
in 2 years he's going to be stronger than Hans? You're out of your mind. What
There's
did he
a
say?
chance he will be, but he's not going to make it to world champion, unfortunately.
I'm just saying when we start, because you're right, you have to collect all the odds. And I'm not going to say he's a favorite or something, but like
Yeah.
you got 27-10 at 19. He's also gained as many points as Niemann has in the last stretch. And I'm
He's
like,
pretty good.
I'm looking at this kid and he's coming up, and I'm like, well, he's got better chance than Niemann just looking at the
I
rating graph.
I do also see Sindarov as a top 10 player.
Maybe we should have done a tier list.
And he's
Like
got the
Yeah.
who
Uzbekistan connection where those people got teams, buddy. I mean, it's amazing to me. They got two people that are fighting for it now. Uzbekistan came out of
I can't even
nowhere.
tell you what he doesn't have from my rubric, by the way, Jesse. So
Okay.
I'm not going to give you a convincing refutation
Yeah.
here. I thought about him, of course. He is on my junior team as well. So I thought about him, and I think he's close. And when you check down my rubric, it's not clear what he's lacking to be
Hmm.
world champion. I couldn't say he doesn't have top tier talent or work ethic, psychological strength he has, physical shape, fine, child prodigy, yes, never plateaued pre 2700, yes. I mean, he sort of plateaued at 2690 for a few months. I'm not going to hold that against him. No distraction that I know of. So he sort of checks off my rubric, but my instinct still told me no.
Hmm.
So I mean, he should be close because there's no like obvious, nothing obvious against him, but my instinct says no.
Okay.
Well, exciting times. Um,
I'm shocked that Jesse doesn't think that Niemann could make top 10
Oh no, it's
because it's a big difference to make top 10 or world
yeah,
champion,
of
right?
course.
Is like a whole different question. And that Jesse wouldn't even think he'd make top 10 when he's number 20 at age 21 and his performance rating is probably in like the top 10 to 15 in the last
Well,
year or
one of the
two.
things I love about these predictions, is it puts me out there, and then
Yeah.
I said Sindarov was going to be number 10 by the time next year. I don't know if he will be, but I think actually one of those other kids that I also mentioned that are on 19
Hmm.
as well. I think a much better chance.
Yeah.
Could Neiman make it? I don't think so. I don't see it, but it's possible. Sure, it's possible. I'm not. I mean, that's maybe that would get a 10% chance. That's
Hmm.
probably. I usually this because you guys are persuasive. I'm going back down to more like 5% chance you can make number 10 next by this time next year.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good, Kostya. We're persuasive. Something I never knew
we
on
had
this podcast.
we had some movement on this pod. Yeah, for sure. Cool. Actually, yeah, very interesting question. Actually, thinking about all the odds for everyone of becoming world champion.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, time is running out for these players because like there are going to be some new juniors that are just going to be a step up on the talent level,
Yeah.
and it's gonna be a problem. It's gonna be problems.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, shall we end it there?
Let's end it there.
All right. Thank you, folks, for listening. Please check us out on Patreon if you like to support the podcast. And give us a rating on Spotify. It takes 2 seconds. You can click the rating, and then it shows the rating that you gave it. Okay. Thanks, everyone.